The All-Star break is over, and we're entering the final stretch of the Oakland A's. And it's making me think about my favorite A's team of all time.
You are Locked On A's, your daily Oakland A's podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday and hello A's fans, and welcome to Locked On A's, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. This is the podcast we talk about your Oakland A's and the final stretch of their final year in Oakland. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please, I'm begging you, I'm imploring you as we go through this emotional few months together, please call me. Where's my lower third? Please call me. Oh, there it is. Call me Sully. I've been a baseball podcaster for many years, and I've been at the Locked On Podcast Network. This is my sixth full season. My first one hosting Locked On A's. I'm always the host of Locked On MLB. I'm doing 5 episodes of Locked On MLB and 5 episodes of Locked On A's every week. Find us at Locked On A's on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. If you're listening to us every single day and you post on one of those great social media sites, use that hashtag EverydayA's. We get an idea of who's hosting us. Oh, I put that over my lower third. Well, what are you going to do? Today's episode of Locked On A's is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even Anaheim. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. I'll tell you why I say that only Anaheim. It says on the copy on your rival city, but yeah, Anaheim. There you go. This is the All-Star break is over. The Angels are coming into town for a 3-game set. Then come the Astros. You're hoping that the A's can beat up the Angels a little bit and maybe bring them a little bit closer. And then you hope to play spoiler with Houston, which all of baseball wants us to do. I was thinking 10 years ago, the 2014 A's, I was asked, what's my favorite A's team of all time? I don't even think it's close. The 2014 A's team was one of the teams that I felt the closest to. I followed every day. There was something special about that team. And with that, and it's strange that a team that didn't play a single home playoff game was the one that I have the most emotional attachment to. But I'm going to continue to have the most emotional attachment to that team. And I want to take us down a little bit down memory lane for that team, reviewing what the autopsy was. And maybe it's too late to learn the lessons in Oakland, but maybe other teams can learn some of the lessons of that club. That team, I was, here in the Bay Area. At the time, I was doing the old Sully Baseball daily podcast. There was I do not believe Locked On existed back then, but I had my own podcast. It was called Sully Baseball, and I was doing that every single. I did 365 episodes of that a year, and I was watching every A's game to the point where I got my friend Anna, who at the time was a goat farmer in Wisconsin. We went to college together, and then she said, "F all this, I'm going to become a goat farmer in Wisconsin." And even she started following the A's every single day because that's how fun this team was. And there was a certain rhythm towards the rebuilding process. I don't know if you remember this, but the A's looked like they were putting together a pretty decent team in the early 2010s. And then one year, Billy Beane traded everybody, Gio Gonzalez, Andrew Bailey. Everyone just went out the door, and everyone said it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace to baseball. The A's can't even keep their players. And out of the blue, they won on the final day of the season, the American League West over the Texas Rangers. The Texas Rangers were supposed to win everything that year. They came within one Nelson Cruz leap away from winning the World Series the previous year. This was supposed to be their big revenge year. They were in first place for most of the season. The A's spent one day in first place by themselves, And that was the final day of the season. That was when Josh Hamilton famously clanked the ball off of his glove. That was a wild A's team filled with young players you've never heard of and a smattering of aging veterans, including Bartolo Colon. And they won the division, and they played a thrilling series against the Detroit Tigers, which included the walk-off hit by Coco Chris, facing elimination. But they were no match for Justin Verlander. And there was a little bit of like, oh my God, something great's happening here in Oakland. 2013 was a year where the A's were expected to be good, and they were. And by the end of the year, there were 3 American League teams that all finished like bunched together at the top: Detroit, Boston, and Oakland. And it was a 3-way coin toss. The Tigers had the big superstars, except they didn't have a bullpen. The A's were now a seasoned playoff team. And the Red Sox had a lot of veterans that they kind of cobbled together, and they had the emotion behind them, behind the Boston Marathon bombing. But any one of those 3 teams could have won the pennant. And again, the A's had a razor-thin division series with Texas. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say Texas, with Detroit. The Rangers wound up being tied for a wild card spot. They lost a 1-game playoff. But once again, great games against Detroit. And once again, Justin Verlander was the difference. All right. So now the A's went into 2014 with a sense that they were a playoff team. They went into the year knowing they were good. They went into the year knowing they should win the division. And everyone in the Bay Area was, had their eyes on the Tigers, because they were the big bad boys that were tormenting the A's. And of course, there was a little chip on the shoulder of a lot of A's fans, because the A's were putting together these fun teams, but the Giants piled up a pair of world championships in 2010 and 2012. So in 2014, there was a little bit of the buck and bronco, and that now is the A's turn. And things couldn't go better for the A's in the first half of the 2014 season if every A's fan asked a genie for the season. They got off to just a fantastic start. And the 2014 A's came out of the gate swinging and came out of the gate clicking. And while they lost Grant Balfour, their closer, and they tried and experimented with Jim Johnson, who was a closer for Baltimore the year before, Bob Melvin started basically doing the proverbial Rubik's Cube in the bullpen and came up with a solution where friend of the podcast, Sean Doolittle, became the closer. Luke Gregerson became a terrific setup man. And Dan Otero became like the greatest vulture of all time, where he wound up getting 8 wins out of the bullpen. He was always there. If the game was tied, he would get the decision. And Fernando Obad wound up having a phenomenal season with his 1.57 ERA. At the time, I was friends with, I developed a nice friendship with Sean Doolittle's fiance, Erin Dolan, who's a wonderful writer. And she was a fan of the podcast, and I was a fan of her writing. And I probably went to 20 A's games that year, mainly because I could text Erin and Sean Doolittle and say, hey, can I come to the game today? And as Sean joked, seats were available. Comps were not that hard. So I brought my sons to the game. I brought my cousins to the game. We got fabulous seats, and I got to see the A's up front that whole summer, and it was magical. Sonny Gray pitched well. They acquired Scott Kazmir, and he wound up doing well. Jesse Chavez was coming in and out of the bullpen in the rotation. He did well. Tommy Vallone pitched well for a while. And they had just a great combination of pitchers in their bullpen, especially once they dumped Johnson as the closer. And they also had an interesting lineup. Lowry hit well. Derek Norris became an all-star. Coco Chris always seemed to get the right hit at the right time. Josh Reddick, while sometimes seemed a little out of control, did the job pretty well. Craig Craig Gentry, to say that name 3 times fast, contributed with his speed and with his glove. You had the likes of Nick Punto did a good job for a while. Jed Lowry and Eric Sogard and Alberto Callaspo all contributed there in the infield. And the team fired on all cylinders. And there were magical nights. I remember there was a game that was on a Friday night on July 18th where the A's took on the Baltimore Orioles. And it was newly acquired Jeff Samardzija was pitching well, but it was a Manny Machado home run in the 7th inning, gave Baltimore a 4-2 lead. And Baltimore took that 4-2 lead into the 9th inning. And then in the bottom of the 9th inning, Yoenis Cespedes, we'll get back to him, beat out an infield single. And then Brandon Moss got a little looper base hit into right field, just past the second baseman. And up stepped Josh Donaldson, who had a deep fly ball, 3-run home run. The place was going crazy. The A's could play celebration, and the crowd of 27,232 were cheering on, because on that day, on July 18th, 2024, the A's were the best team in baseball. This was the team that was going to win it all. You may have made a note. The A's did not win it all that year. You may not remember what happened, but it's worth bringing up because, do you know what? It's a cautionary tale. This episode of Locked On A's, This episode of Locked On A's is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. I went on a fabulous baseball trip earlier this year. I flew into Buffalo. I went to see the Buffalo Bisons play. By the way, Buffalo is a beautiful city, and I'm not kidding. I saw the Bisons play there. Then I went to Syracuse. So I got to see the Syracuse Mets play in their nice stadium. And then off I went to Cooperstown. And I spent 2 absolutely magical days in Cooperstown. Oh, my God, I could live there. And each time I was there, I had a fantastic place to stay. A beautiful downtown hotel in the lovely downtown of Buffalo, a nice, safe hotel near the campus of Syracuse, and a fabulous bed and breakfast, which was walking distance of both the lake and the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. I got them all through Booking.com. And I'm telling you something, from hotels that overlook the stadium to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices all across the United States. Your summer travel is going to be all set. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, including Anaheim. Book today at Booking.com on the site or in the Booking.com app. Booking.com, more like Booking.yeah. Hey, if you've been listening to this show, you know a little something about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. Get in on daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000. Prize Picks is now available in 30 states across the country, including Texas, Georgia, and right here in California. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less on Prize Picks. It's really that easy. Hey, where is your hub for sports news, sports takes, sports opinions? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you to bring the biggest sports stories out there. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, and takes, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. The A's went into the All-Star break in 2014 as the best team in baseball, but they were also star-studded. They had acquired Jeff Samardzija, who was an all-star for Chicago. But Derek Norris, the catcher, was an all-star. Brandon Moss, first baseman, all-star. Sean Doolittle, all-star. Josh Donaldson, all-star. Scott Kazmir, all-star. And Yoenis Cespedes, all-star. They were the best team in baseball and one of the best represented teams at the all-star break. And there were decent crowds showing up. I mean, all right, they weren't breaking attendance records, but there were fans showing up, having a great time, singing Celebration in Oakland. And there was this aura around the team because they added Samardzija, an all-star, to the rotation. Now they had a deep rotation, a deep bullpen, a balanced lineup. They went into the all-star game with incredible depth. And there was mumbling that they may add one more player at the trade deadline, aiming, focusing on getting past Detroit and getting into the World Series. The Giants won there too. Now it's the A's turn. And this was going to be the great revenge of Moneyball. Remember how Moneyball was a big hit movie in around 2009, 2010, but they didn't win the series. Now Billy Beane was going to do it. And then it happened. The most bizarre trade, I think, in the history of baseball. The Red Sox traded their ace, John Lester, and reserve outfielder Johnny Gomes, who both were fan favorites from the 2013 World Series championship just the year before, in exchange for Yoenis Cespedes. From the beginning, people looked at that trade in a bizarre way. Like, wait a minute, why are they trading Cespedes? What's going on here? And I understand, and I was here when that sense of, wait a second, why are they trading this all-star fan favorite who is dynamic and has a flair for the dramatic and a flair for this and that and the other thing for another pitcher when their strength is their starting rotation? The A's were 66-41. The only team whose winning percentage was above 600 at the time. You would think you would stand pat instead make a major trade. It's funny, as you know, I'm a native New Englander, and most of my friends are diehard Red Sox fans. They hated the trade because John Lester was a homegrown ace, part of 2 World Series championship teams, and this became this bizarre side of the Red Sox where they trade away homegrown player. They don't spend their money to keep their homegrown players. They go, why won't you just re-sign John Lester, who is a free agent to be? Well, the thought process was John Lester was one of the best pitchers in baseball, and you're going to add a superstar ace who was the ace of the 2013 World Series champions and could have made an argument that he was the World Series MVP if not for the star performance of David Ortiz. So they're adding a Cy Young contender to an already deep rotation. However, they removed the Jenga piece that was Yoenis Cespedes from the lineup. It was like they had a recipe that everything was cooking, it was delicious. Then they added too much of one element and took away some of the other, and something didn't taste right. Now, people will point to Lester pitched well here, Cespedes went on a slump there. The offense was already showing cracks of this, that, and the other thing. The rotation was suffering some injuries. They needed some assistance. I can agree to all of those facts. And I remember I was trying to defend the trade to my friend Melissa, who's a diehard A's fan. And I said, well, Lester is a great champion. Lester helped pitch the Red Sox. And she said, all I know is they were winning with Cespedes and now they're not. And remember, they were playing 6-17 baseball, best record in baseball. They were going to have home field advantage right through Game 7 of the World Series. And then after the trade, they had the 3rd worst record in the American League. They barely played .400 baseball the rest of the way. They lost 33 out of the next 55 games. And it got to the point that forget clinching home field advantage throughout the playoffs. They made the playoffs by the skin of their teeth. They had to win the final game of the season to push back Seattle to force themselves a chance to play in the wild card game as the road team where they played Kansas City. And Lester came on the mound to pitch that game. And it was one of the few times in Bob Melvin's history that I think he did a poor job as manager. And I'll tell you exactly why. Lester took the mound and for the most part seemed to be doing okay. He gave the A's had, thanks to a pair of Brandon Moss home runs, had a 7-3 lead going into the 8th inning. Okay, 7-3 lead. You know you had Gregerson, who was rested and ready. You know you had Doolittle, who was rested and ready. You had the entire pitching staff who was rested and ready. And despite all the bad things that happened down the stretch, they had a 4-run lead and a chance to go to the division series where they would have to face the Angels. All right. Escobar singled and then stole a base and blah, blah, blah. And Aoki got a ground out and Lorenzo Cain then singled. At that moment, Lester should have been taken out. Now, you could make the case that Lester should not have come out to pitch the 8th. You could also make the case that you could have said, okay, Lester, we're going to pitch you until you let up a base runner. The minute Escobar got on base, said, okay, we got Gregerson and Doolittle, get us the last 6 outs. Because in the end, you need to get Gregerson to get out of that inning. But the main issue that happened was Lester couldn't hold anyone on. He wouldn't throw over to first. And the Royals knew that. And they were jackrabbits. And they just stole at will against Lester. They recorded 2 stolen bases in that inning alone and put Gregerson in a position where he had to get 2 clutch strikeouts against Perez and Infante just to keep the lead. But a 7-3 lead suddenly became a 7-6 lead. And then sadly, friend of the podcast, Sean Doolittle, allowed a run in the 9th. And then it just became abject chaos. And then in the 12th inning, the A's took the lead. But we all know there was with 1 out, there was the collision in left field. And from that moment, you just knew this was going to be bad. And it was. Colon got the single. Perez got the single. And Donaldson laying on the ground. Johnny Gomes aimlessly picking up the ball. And I got the sense that Lester was allowed to die on the vine in the 8th inning out of a sense of borderline defiance. That we were going to show you that Lester was the right move to make. We're going to keep him on there. He's going to be the one clinching this. And he should not have come out for the 8th. Now, if the A's had won that game, they would have faced the Angels. And the Angels were swept by the Royals. The Royals were just playing like a team with house money. And they beat an Angels team that I think overlooked them. And then beat a Orioles team that was very good but depleted by injuries. And lo and behold, for A's fans, who got to be the team jumping up and down winning the championship? The Giants. And there was a sense that you knew this was the best chance for this squad. And lo and behold, by the end of the year, they were dismantled. And I'm thinking about that team a lot, 10 years later, and where the A's are right now, and what could have been. Because the what could have beens are agonizing. But now, well, fill me with a lot of nostalgia. Hey, get supplies from the site that is made for skilled trade. Whoops. Get supplies from the site that is for skilled trade. Supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources, the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands to get your order delivered to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trade can get a competitive edge by joining supplyhouses.com free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their membership at supplyhouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Where is that site again? That site is supplyhouse.com. Let's hear from our friends over at FanDuel. Now, you know FanDuel. I know FanDuel. We all know FanDuel. Here's FanDuel right there. Trying to find the lower third for that. FanDuel. I love sports. Got the Olympics coming up. We don't have the NBA and the NHL like we had. Football isn't going. We don't have as many sports as I'd like. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This is a reminder that Locked On has begun the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channel app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channel app. Lester signed with the Cubs and won a championship. Again, I've never seen a trade that both sides hated it as much as that. The Red Sox fans wanted Lester there forever, and they couldn't. And while eventually Cespedes was flipped for Rick Porcello, the Red Sox had to trade for Chris Sale and sign David Price to fill the void of Lester, of which many Red Sox fans said, hey, you could have just kept Lester. Now, granted, Porcello, Price, and Sale all helped the Red Sox win the championship in 2018, albeit a little bit of a tainted one. The Red Sox were doing some shenanigans. But Josh Donaldson spoke out against the A's and was traded. Jeff Samardzija was sent packing, and pretty soon the A's were dismantled. By 2018, the A's were a playoff team again, but did anybody think the 2018 A's were going to the World Series? Did anyone think the 2019 A's were going to go to the World Series? And in that weird COVID year, yeah, I thought the A's had a shot in the COVID year, but that was a weird year. 2014 really felt like, in retrospect, the last legit shot to go to the World Series in Oakland. They were a fun team. They had dramatic wins. They had wild wins. They were fun characters. They seemed like a fun group of people. And Cespedes was one of the most dramatic and beloved players on that team. And Billy Beane outthought himself. I totally understand the appeal of inserting John Lester into the team. And if they were able to do it in a way that didn't include Yoenis Cespedes, I think it would have made a great move. They would have had an incredibly deep rotation, which at the time, the rotation was experiencing some injuries. But sometimes a recipe, it's beyond some of the numbers. And I know the sabermetrics community poo-poos this. But the team was put together in a way where they were playing like the default pick to win the pennant. And then a major chemistry or recipe-changing deal suddenly turned that to a team that barely made the postseason. And then were out and didn't even play a single postseason game. I remember going to all those games. I probably went to 20, maybe 25 games that year at the Coliseum. And granted, they were all comps and they were great seats. But I really felt like I'm witnessing a team up front. This is something special. And in the end, it was. Not because they won a championship. Sometimes the teams you love are not necessarily the ones that you fly the banners for. But because I felt that this team was giving their fans a fabulous summer. Little did I know it would be the last Oakland summer where the fans were thinking, we could win this thing. Well, let's start the second half of the season. Who knows? If there's going to be a great miracle, it's got to start now. So follow us at Locked On A's on Twitter or on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter or whatever it's called now. Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Let's start the final stretch after the last All-Star break, and we'll see what trades happen soon. This is Locked On A's. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.